Good morning. Today, a localized militia movement in the eastern Congo isn't just capturing a village. It is, well, threatening to act as a tripwire that could pull three sovereign nations into an all-out interstate war.
Yeah.
We welcome you to today's deep dive.
Thank you. Yes.
In an era often characterized by rapid, sensationalized headlines, our objective today is to provide you with a calm, professional, and entirely objective assessment of current events.
Right. A steady analytical view of the facts is truly the most vital tool for any decision maker trying to navigate overlapping crises.
Exactly. We are looking at the strategic landscape across the African continent and its immediate intersections with global security. Our commitment to you, the listener, is to deliver the facts, evaluate competing national perspectives, and outline potential courses of action. And to do this without generating unnecessary alarm or fear.
Which is paramount right now.
Indeed. Now, this deep dive is brought to you by ProWave AI and is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application. Before we proceed into our strategic analysis, we have a required reading for today's briefing.
Go right ahead.
Stylo News Intel update. Africa Situation Report,
Yeah.
27 August 2026.
To give you a brief understanding of our methodology today, Stylo News is the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software.
Which is usually for enterprises, right?
Correct. That enterprise-level software is traditionally designed for highly complex operations across government, military, and business sectors.
So it's serious intelligence capability.
It is. What this means is that you have unique access to a tool specifically engineered to support global decision-makers in real time. Our mission for this deep dive is clear. We will calmly and neutrally analyze the strategic situation, the conflict zones, and the flashpoints across North, West, East, and Central Africa.
Based entirely on the latest intelligence estimates.
Yes, to help you understand the broader geopolitical picture, focusing not just on what is happening, but the mechanics of why and how these events unfold.
We will examine the kinetic military movements, but equally important, we will assess the underlying structural challenges, the social sentiments, and the diplomatic maneuvers that, define the current operational environment.
Let us begin our strategic analysis by looking at Central and East Africa. In this region, we are observing state militaries and non-state armed groups engaged in highly complex, overlapping theaters of operation.
It is a profoundly complicated landscape.
Looking specifically at the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Burundi, the intelligence outlines a multi-layered conflict driven by a multitude of armed factions.
And to understand it, we must clearly define the primary actors on the board. The intelligence estimates identify three distinct threats.
Starting with the ADF, I believe.
Yes. First, you have the ADF, the Allied Democratic Forces. They operate under the banner of ISCAP, which is the Islamic State Central Africa Province.
Right.
They utilize Salafi jihadist tactics in the Ituri and Haut-Uele provinces, conducting rural raids to destabilize local governance. They remain a designated, highly ideological terrorist threat.
Then you have the M23, or the March 23 movement.
Correct. And the M23 functions very differently from a terror cell. They act more as a major insurgent military force.
They hold territory, don't they?
Exactly. They are currently shaping local governance, establishing checkpoints, and controlling significant territory in the Kivus.
And the third group.
Finally, there is the FDLR, the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda. This is an armed group with historical ties to the 1994 Rwandan genocide, and their continued presence fundamentally drives the security calculus of neighboring Rwanda.
Which brings us to a highly concerning tactical development in the intelligence reports over the last 2 weeks.
The troop buildup.
Yes, there had been an observable military buildup by the FARDC, which is the official Congolese National Army, operating alongside Burundian state forces.
That is a significant shift.
They are massing in South Kivu, specifically around the Minembwe area. Reports indicate they are utilizing surveillance drones, organizing mercenaries, and stockpiling ammunition.
This specific buildup is a critical flashpoint because it forces us to evaluate vastly different national perspectives.
From Kigali's point of view, for instance.
Right. From Rwanda's perspective in Kigali, the continued presence of the FDLR in eastern DRC is viewed not as a simple policing issue, but as a direct existential national security threat.
So they have to react.
Because of this, Kigali maintains a highly defensive, forward-leaning posture. On the other hand, the active deployment of Burundian forces into this already volatile mix significantly raises the threat of regional retaliation.
Looking at this intelligence, this doesn't feel like a traditional battlefield. It operates more like a three-dimensional chessboard or perhaps a geopolitical fault line.
That is an apt analogy.
I mean, a small tactical shift by a local militia in the DRC doesn't just change local policing. It acts as a tripwire that triggers a massive seismic response from neighboring capitals like Kigali or Bujumbura. How exactly does that mechanism work?
That mechanism of escalation is exactly what makes this region so volatile. When a localized militia shifts territory in the DRC, they are rarely just taking an isolated village.
What are they taking then?
They are moving into lucrative mineral smuggling routes, or they are approaching a sovereign border, or they are threatening an ethnic group with deep ties to a neighboring state.
I see.
That movement crosses the tripwire. Those capitals know that today's local skirmish easily becomes tomorrow's cross-border raid or massive refugee crisis.
The primary course of action recommended by intelligence analysts here is the intense monitoring of diplomatic channels. The immediate goal is to prevent a localized insurgency from rapidly escalating into an interstate war between the DRC, Rwanda, and Burundi.
Careful diplomatic de-escalation is absolutely required to prevent that cross-border spillover.
Transitioning our focus slightly to the Horn of Africa, we see a different type of conflict, one centered on foundational resources and state sovereignty.
Yes, the situation on the Nile.
Ethiopia has recently announced the development of 3 new hydropower dams on the Blue Nile.
This immediately brings two conflicting national perspectives into stark relief, centered entirely on the mechanics of water security.
Ethiopia sees this as their right, correct?
Exactly. Ethiopia's stance is firmly rooted in the sovereign right to utilize its territorial water resources for national development, electricity generation, and economic independence.
Conversely, Egypt views the flow of the Nile as a matter of absolute national survival. Cairo relies on the Nile for the vast majority of its freshwater and agricultural stability.
They do. Their perspective is that prior notification and coordination for upstream dams are simply mandatory.
They often cite self-defense, don't
They
they?
frequently cite the right to legitimate self-defense under international law when discussing downstream water security. To manage this, we are seeing Egypt's foreign minister, Badir Abdelhadi, actively engaging in diplomatic efforts across the Horn of Africa.
Building alliances to offset the physical threat.
Precisely. The strategy is to secure Egypt's position by building regional alliances, utilizing diplomacy to offset what they perceive as a physical threat to their core resources.
And just adjacent to that diplomatic maneuvering, in Somalia there are acute kinetic operations.
Very active ones.
Somali national forces, specifically the highly trained Danab commandos, recently repelled a significant assault on the city of Baidoa.
It's a very complex assault.
Yes, the attack was launched by troops loyal to the ousted regional leader, Laftagreen, fighting alongside Islamist insurgents, primarily al-Shabaab.
This engagement demonstrates the extreme fragility of federal authority in Somalia.
How so?
Well, the mechanism of governance there requires national forces to simultaneously combat regional political fragmentation, like an ousted leader trying to reclaim power, while also fighting deeply entrenched insurgent networks. It stretches state capacity to the breaking point.
That brings up an interesting point. When we talk about national survival, we tend to fixate on who is shooting at whom. But analyzing this next section of intelligence, I want to challenge our traditional definitions of what constitutes security. We spend immense time analyzing insurgent movements, but it seems to me that failing infrastructure, collapsing mines, and health emergencies actually pose a faster, more unpredictable threat to state stability than armed insurgencies. Do you agree with that assessment?
But redefinition of security is essential for any accurate strategic assessment. We often define security purely in kinetic terms. But state stability rests on a foundation of basic human needs.
Right.
An insurgency might take years to erode a government's control of a province. But an uncontained epidemic or a mass casualty infrastructure failure can erode public trust and strip away state legitimacy in a matter of weeks. They act as massive threat multipliers.
The most pressing example of this in the current intelligence is the expanding Ebola outbreak in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
Yes, it's highly concerning.
The outbreak is particularly concentrated in active mining zones. A deeply troubling detail from the reports is that fear of the disease and fear of the government's response is keeping pregnant women away from healthcare facilities altogether.
When a population actively avoids fundamental medical care out of fear, it is a grave indicator of systemic breakdown.
What is the current course of action?
The course of action currently underway involves medical containment efforts led by the Africa CDC. However, the mechanics of operating an epidemiological response are severely compromised here.
Because of the conflict.
Exactly. The target area is an active conflict zone, which is further experiencing prolonged internet and mobile network shutdowns.
Without communication networks, you cannot perform contact tracing. You cannot coordinate medical logistics.
Precisely. The state's inability to maintain basic communications actively fuels the biological threat.
That breakdown of state capacity isn't just biological. We are seeing the exact same systemic failure in physical infrastructure. In the Central African Republic, a recent gold mine collapse resulted in over 100 fatalities.
While not an act of terrorism, an incident of that magnitude is a direct symptom of weak state regulation.
It shows a lack of control over the extractive industries.
It highlights poor emergency response capabilities and the chronic, unregulated instability of extractive industries operating in conflict-affected areas.
We see a similar structural tragedy in Conakry, Guinea. The Dar es Salaam rubbish landfill collapsed following heavy rains, killing at least 30 people and injuring dozens more.
A terrible tragedy.
It was reported that residents had ignored previous eviction notices, forcing Prime Minister Mamadou Ardibouline to personally visit the site to oversee the response.
It is a profound failure of urban planning and structural enforcement. When the state cannot safely manage municipal waste or enforce basic residential zoning, human security fundamentally degrades from the ground up.
We also have two critical reports out of Kenya that highlight the need for stability and truth in a fragile environment. A fatal helicopter crash in Samburu County claimed 7 lives.
Notably, the casualties included Ecuador's intelligence chief and 5 American citizens.
Investigations are currently ongoing for that. Separately, there is a developing controversy where wildlife experts are formally contesting initial reports that cyanide poisoning was the cause of 20 recent elephant deaths.
Both incidents in Kenya, while vastly different in nature, require immediate and objective investigation.
Because rumors can be dangerous.
Exactly. In highly sensitive geopolitical regions, unconfirmed rumors regarding the death of a foreign intelligence official or the poisoning of vital wildlife resources can quickly generate diplomatic friction or economic fallout. Establishing causality is paramount to preventing speculation.
Moving geographically from Central and East Africa, we transition to West and North Africa. Here we see how internal regional fragility is directly connected to broader geopolitical interventions and international migration crises.
In West Africa, the intelligence paints a picture of entrenched instability in Mali and Niger.
Both currently under military rule.
Yes, both nations are governed by military juntas that face relentless pressure from heavily armed insurgent groups, primarily the Islamic State Sahel province, and JNM, which is an umbrella coalition of al-Qaeda-aligned organizations.
A particularly notable tactical development in Mali is that JNM has recently shown strategic alignment with separatist elements of the FLA near the capital, Bamako.
Which is fascinating.
Ideologically, a jihadist organization and a secular separatist group have entirely opposing end goals, don't they?
They do. That ideological mismatch is what makes this intelligence so vital. It indicates a purely pragmatic, operational marriage of convenience.
They share a common enemy.
Exactly. They share a common enemy in the military junta. By coordinating their operations, they significantly enhance their combined ability to stretch and challenge the state's military apparatus.
Looking at Nigeria, the data shows a clear contrast between the center and the periphery. The federal government in Abuja remains politically stable, but there is severe peripheral instability.
Driven by multiple factions.
Groups like Boko Haram and ISWAP, alongside heavily armed bandit networks, are driving mass violence and kidnapping in northwestern areas like Sokoto and Kebbi.
The mechanism of governance there is fragmented. The state firmly holds the center and major economic hubs, but it struggles to project a monopoly on violence in the peripheral, rural territories, leaving populations vulnerable to non-state actors.
Shifting to North Africa, the economic data out of Libya is stark, and it directly fuels instability. Youth unemployment has reached 50.1%.
An incredibly high figure.
That is the highest rate in all of North Africa, and it is actively fueling protests in the streets of Tripoli, exacerbated by prolonged and systemic power cuts.
Economic disenfranchisement of that magnitude creates an incredibly permissive environment. When half the youth population cannot secure a livelihood and basic services fail, it creates prime conditions for unrest, radicalization, and exploitation by human trafficking networks.
This directly ties into the ongoing tragedy of the Mediterranean migration routes. Reports confirm a migrant boat recently sank off the coast of Tunisia, leaving at least 13 people missing,
The perspectives and courses of action regarding this corridor are highly complex. Southern European nations bear the immediate logistical impact.
which is driving political responses in Europe.
We are currently seeing Italian Eurodeputee Denis Nesci pushing forcefully for Italy to lead a renewed European Mediterranean strategy.
What is his primary focus?
His perspective focuses heavily on robust maritime security, strict migration control, and economic cooperation with North African states to stem the flow.
However, broader, unified defense strategies in the Mediterranean for NATO and the European Union are currently being complicated by escalating diplomatic and political tensions between Turkey and Israel.
Those tensions create a fractured diplomatic environment in the Eastern Mediterranean, exactly when unified maritime and security strategies are most required to manage the compounding crises.
To understand the true global scope of these events, we must look at how international military footprints intersect in this region. The intelligence reports that China's PLA Air Force recently deployed J-16 fighter jets to Egypt.
For joint combat drills.
Yes, termed Eagles of Civilization. These drills are operating alongside Egyptian Rafale fighters amidst heightened tensions in the broader Middle East.
It is a clear demonstration of China projecting military diplomacy. By deepening defense ties in a highly strategic corridor like Egypt, Beijing secures strategic access and demonstrates its capability to operate far beyond its traditional sphere of influence.
Concurrently, we have a report from the U.S. Southern Command, which conducted a lethal strike on a low-profile narco-trafficking vessel in the Eastern Pacific, resulting in 2 fatalities.
Which might seem out of place.
You might wonder why a U.S. strike in the Pacific matters in an Africa briefing. It is included in the intelligence to demonstrate the globally distributed, highly transnational nature of current security operations, targeting illicit networks, which often fund the very insurgencies we see in West Africa.
Exactly. The financial networks are global.
Looking at these overlapping global military footprints, it strikes me that North and West Africa are currently functioning as a geopolitical barometer for the world's superpowers. They are projecting influence here specifically to test the waters of international alliances.
That is the precise mechanical function of these operations. These regions offer a landscape where great powers can conduct joint military drills, secure resource access, or test diplomatic leverage without triggering direct conflict with one another.
Testing the waters, as it were.
When China flies J-16s with Egypt, or European powers debate Mediterranean security frameworks, they are taking atmospheric pressure readings of global power dynamics.
To truly synthesize the objective facts we have discussed, we must examine how populations are reacting on the ground and what the intelligence suggests will happen next. We turn now to social media sentiment and strategic forecasting.
Analyzing open source data, specifically recent sentiment data on X, provides a valuable overlay to the tactical intelligence on the ground.
What are we seeing in West Africa?
In West Africa, the sentiment data is overwhelmingly negative. The digital conversation is highly focused on fear, exhaustion, and frustration regarding repeated terror attacks and the economic instability stemming from military rule.
In East Africa, the data shows deep public concern regarding the deadly Ebola outbreak in the DRC and its high mortality rate.
Although there is a counterbalance there.
Right, this is balanced somewhat in the region's overall digital footprint by highly positive expressions regarding cultural and religious worship events in neighboring Uganda.
Moving to the Mediterranean and Libya tags, the social media sentiment heavily prioritizes security threats.
From the European side,
Yes, there is a distinct, measurable focus from users in Southern Europe calling for increased military vigilance to counter the instability emanating from the North African corridor.
public sentiment often acts as an early warning radar. How do decision makers actually balance raw, often negative public emotion against calculated, objective strategic intelligence?
It is a critical balance of capability versus tolerance. Strategic intelligence tells a decision maker what is physically happening and where the military assets are.
But the sentiment data,
The early warning radar of public sentiment tells them how much political runway they have. A government might have the military capability to sustain a counterinsurgency, but if public sentiment shows overwhelming exhaustion and anger over the economy, the political cost of continuing that fight might be regime collapse.
with that in mind, let us calmly lay out what the intelligence estimates forecast as the most likely events in the near term. What should you, the listener, be watching for in the coming weeks?
Based on the data, first, anticipate a localized military escalation in the eastern DRC.
Likely involving the Congolese state forces and the M23.
Yes, particularly around the South Kivu area we discussed. Second, expect continued and geographically expanding violence from JNM and other insurgent actors across the Sahel.
Testing the structural limits of the military juntas in Mali and Niger.
Correct. Third, watch for ongoing and potentially sharpening diplomatic friction over the Blue Nile dams as Ethiopia proceeds with infrastructural construction and Egypt intensifies its regional diplomacy to secure its water rights.
Fourth, keep a close watch on the political landscape in South Africa. The upcoming November 2026 local elections are critical.
Intelligence indicates the ruling ANC faces significant voter backlash over basic service delivery and economic challenges.
And finally, on the economic front, monitor the WHX Nairobi Healthcare Expo scheduled for mid-September. Intelligence marks this event as a potential positive catalyst for East African healthcare market growth and cross-border investment.
It is a key event to watch.
That concludes our strategic intelligence overview. To ensure you have access to this level of in-depth analysis at your fingertips, we want to explain a bit more about our sponsor, Stylo News.
Stylo News is available as both a mobile and computer application. It allows you to download and completely customize your feed to receive personal, intelligence-style briefs.
Pulling from multiple sources.
It pulls verified data from hundreds of traditional news sources, as well as real-time sentiment from platforms like X.
It is designed to cut through the noise and deliver the operational facts you need to understand the world. We strongly encourage you to subscribe to Stylo News to get AI-powered news on demand. You can find it at www.stylonews.com.
Highly recommended.
And dropping the formal anchor persona for a second. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. We know it was a heavy one, covering a lot of ground, but we hope breaking it down by the mechanisms of how these things work helps make sense of a really complex world.
It really is always fascinating to step back and look at how all these different pieces, from local dams to international fighter jets, just connect across the continent.
Absolutely. We would love to hear from you. Please request topics for future deep dives, let us know what regions or issues you want us to unpack next, and make sure you follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms.
Before we go, I do want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We spent a lot of time today talking about troop movements, drone deployments, and fighter jets.
Right, the traditional markers of hard power.
But consider this. Libya is currently sitting on a youth unemployment rate of over 50%. The DRC is trying to fight an incredibly lethal Ebola outbreak, while the communications networks are completely shut down.
Yeah, that's huge.
When you look at the future of Africa, will the most profound world-altering shifts really be dictated by the movements of militias and militaries? Or will they ultimately be driven by the sheer, unstoppable force of demographic pressures colliding with extreme environmental and health crises?
Wow, it is definitely something to think about. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.